Welcome to my channel, please subscribe and share. The auction house reeked of sweat and smoke, the kind of place where men gambled lives as easily as credits. Rylan Voss stood near the back wall, his arms folded, the collar of his jacket turned high to mask his face. He had no business here, no reason to linger among the scavengers, raiders, and pirates who prowled the cramped chamber. Yet his eyes locked on the center stage when the handlers dragged out a figure so small she could barely walk without stumbling. The alien maid was hardly taller than a human child, thin arms bound at the wrists, grey skin dulled as if life had been drained from it. Her oversized eyes darted around in panic, and when the crowd roared with bids, she flinched as if the sound itself might break her. Rylan clenched his jaw. He had seen warlords sell prisoners before, but something about the way this one trembled struck deeper than he expected. She looked like a creature caught in a storm with nowhere to run. The auctioneer boasted in guttural trade cant, spinning tales about rare breeding stock and obedient service. The crowd lapped it up, credits flashing on the display board, voices competing. A group of syndicate men stood near the front, their insignia stitched in crimson across their armor. They were certain to win. The maid's fate would be sealed in the pits of their ships. Rylan should have left. He had freight to deliver and debts to chase. Getting entangled with the Veyrac syndicate was suicide, a lesson hammered into him during his years as a soldier. Yet his feet betrayed him, carrying him forward just as the hammer came down. He moved like lightning, brushing past two guards, grabbing the maid's bound wrist before anyone realized. She let out a startled cry as he yanked her off the platform and barreled toward the exit. Shouts erupted. A shot rang overhead, burning a hole into the ceiling. Rylan shoved through the panicked crowd, his grip unyielding. The girl stumbled but clung tightly, her tiny frame almost weightless against his momentum. Two syndicate enforcers surged after him, weapons drawn. Rylan ducked into the docking corridor, slammed a blast door control, and sprinted the last stretch to his freighter. Once the hatch sealed behind them, silence fell, broken only by the alien's ragged breaths. She crouched against the wall, arms wrapped around her knees, staring at him with unblinking eyes. Rylan leaned against the bulkhead, sweat streaking down his temples. He had acted without thought, and now the consequences were closing in. "What's your name?" he asked, voice rough. Her mouth opened and closed, as if forming the words was painful. "Lyri," she whispered, her accent sharp but understandable. Rylan nodded once. "You're safe for now, Lyri. But you should know, dragging you out of there just painted a target on both of us." She tilted her head, confusion flickering across her face. Slowly, she crawled closer on her knees and reached for his boot, her tiny hands trembling as they gripped the leather. "Master," she said, voice rising with urgency. "You saved me. I serve you now." Rylan stiffened. "That's not how it works. I don't own you." Her grip only tightened, and tears welled in her eyes. "My kind, we cannot break the bond. You take me, I belong. If you leave me, I die." He stared at her, searching for deception, but her gaze held only desperate sincerity. He remembered rumors whispered during campaigns, slave races engineered for loyalty so absolute it became their prison. He cursed under his breath. In rescuing her, he might have doomed her just as surely as if he had left her on the auction block. "Listen," he said carefully. "I don't need a servant. I need you to understand that." But she shook her head, her whole body trembling. "Please. I stay with you. Always. If you cast me away, I have nothing. No breath, no life." The words hit him harder than he wanted to admit. He had seen soldiers beg for comrades not to leave them on battlefields, eyes wide with the same kind of fear. He rubbed a hand over his face, trying to push back the weight settling on his chest. "All right," he muttered at last. "You can stay. For now. Until I figure something out." The relief that washed over her was immediate. She pressed her forehead against his boot as though sealing a vow, then crawled up to sit against the wall near him. She kept close, shoulders brushing his leg whenever he shifted. Rylan sighed. "You really don't let go, do you?" Her faint smile was answer enough. The ship's console chimed, drawing his attention. He strode to the cockpit and scanned the sensors. Already, station security pings were multiplying, But worse were the encrypted signals broadcasting from the Syndicate fleet. They knew exactly who had taken their prize. His name was probably being etched on a death list this very moment. He powered up the engines, feeling the vibration thrum through the hull. The maid, Lyri, appeared behind him, clutching the edge of his chair as if afraid he might vanish without her. He glanced at her, then at the growing swarm of hostile contacts blinking on the screen. "Looks like we just made enemies of half this sector," he said. "Hope you're worth it." Her solemn nod carried more weight than words. Whatever she carried inside her, whatever reason the Syndicate had for buying her, was now Ryland's burden to shield. He throttled forward, the stars stretching into lines as the Iron Fang leapt into the void, carrying both man and alien into a storm they could neither predict nor escape. The hum of the engines filled the cabin as Ryland adjusted course, guiding the ship into the relative safety of open void. He told himself he had only bought time, but the Syndicate's reach was long, and he had little doubt they would come for her and by extension, for him. Lyri hovered at his side, small hands gripping the armrest of his chair as if anchoring herself. He had tried nudging her back toward the crew quarters, but she always returned within moments, her silent watchfulness bordering on unnerving. He caught her reflection in the viewport, her wide eyes fixed not on the stars but on him. "You know, people on this ship need personal space," he said, half an attempt at humor, half a warning. She tilted her head. "Space? Like outside?" Ryland gave a dry chuckle. "Not that kind. The kind where you give a man breathing room." She seemed to consider this, then deliberately moved an inch farther from him, though her fingers still clung to the chair. He rubbed his temple. "Close enough, I guess." Days passed in uneven rhythm. Between jumps through unpatrolled sectors, he tried to teach her basic commands in English, pointing at objects and repeating words until she echoed them back. She absorbed language with surprising speed, though her pronunciation carried a lilting accent that made common words sound foreign. Whenever she failed, she grew flustered, clutching at his sleeve until he reassured her and tried again. She was no ordinary servant. That much he could see in the way she examined technology with cautious fascination, tracing panels with her fingers as if listening for secrets. Once, he found her crouched by the reactor display, eyes shut, whispering in her own tongue. The system lights flickered briefly, then stabilized. When he asked what she had done, she simply said, "Listening." He made a note to keep a closer eye on her. If the Syndicate had valued her so highly, there was more to her than loyalty conditioning. At night, when he retreated to his cabin, he would sometimes wake to find her curled in the corner, having slipped in without sound. She never tried to share his bunk, merely sat folded into herself, eyes closed in light sleep. He wanted to be angry, but each time he saw her trembling in half-dreams, his resolve faltered. It was as if she feared that if she lost sight of him, he might vanish. One evening, after a supply run on a backwater station, trouble finally caught up with them. Ryland noticed the watchers first, two men loitering by the docking clamps, their stares too steady, their hands brushing weapons concealed beneath coats. He returned to the Iron Fang in silence, Lyri trailing at his side, her grip on his sleeve taut. The ambush came fast. A pulse round struck the wall inches from his head as he shoved Lyri behind a crate. He drew his pistol in one fluid motion, dropping one pursuer with a shot to the chest, the other fleeing into the shadows. The firefight ended as quickly as it began, but the message was clear. The Syndicate knew his ship, knew his face, and would not stop. Back aboard, he slammed a fist against the console. "They're tracking us already. This isn't just about me stealing you, is it? What do they want with you?" Lyri stood silent, fingers twisting at the hem of her tunic. Her eyes glistened under the dim lights. "I carry things. Memories. Codes. My people were made to keep them safe." She tapped her temple. "Inside." Ryland leaned back, the weight of her words sinking in. A living data vault. That explained the desperation of her captors. He thought of the Syndicate, a cartel that thrived on secrecy and blackmail. If she held sensitive knowledge, she was worth more than fleets of ships. And now she was bonded to him. "Damn it," he muttered. "You're a walking target." She stepped closer, clutching at his arm. "I stay with you. You protect. That is the bond." He wanted to protest, to tell her he had no stake in this war, but the conviction in her voice stopped him. He had lost enough comrades to know the sound of someone clinging to survival. Turning her away was not an option. In the following days, he drilled her in simple defense. He placed a training pistol in her hands, guiding her fingers over the grip. She shook from head to toe but obeyed, her concentration fierce. He taught her how to aim, how to duck, how to run when things went bad. She listened to every word, though her natural instinct was always to cling to him rather than move apart. Between lessons, their conversations deepened. She asked about his scars, about the military insignia tucked away in a drawer, about the silence that lingered when he spoke of his past. He rarely offered more than fragments, but she pieced together the truth: a squad lost on a barren moon, his survival marked by guilt rather than pride. He was a man who had stopped seeking bonds, yet she had become one without asking permission. The connection unsettled him. Each time she reached for his sleeve, he reminded himself it was conditioning, not choice. Yet when she smiled faintly at his attempts to teach her human idioms, or when she laughed softly at her own clumsy mistakes, he felt something stir that he had long buried. The peace shattered during their next jump. Alarms wailed as a ship dropped out of FTL behind them, sleek and bristling with syndicate insignia. Its weapons lit the void, beams lancing toward the Iron Fang. Rylan dove into maneuvers, the freighter groaning under the strain. Explosions rocked the hull as shields flared and sputtered. He barked orders, telling Lyri to stay down, but she scrambled to the console beside him, her small hands pressing against the panels. The system flickered, then enemy targeting reticles vanished from the screen. The syndicate ship faltered, its barrage scattering wide. Rylan seized the opening, twisting the freighter through a narrow asteroid field, scraping past rocks that could crush them in an instant. He pushed the engines until the pursuing ship broke off, unwilling to risk destruction. Silence returned, broken only by ragged breaths. He turned to Lyri, who sagged against the console, her face pale. "What the hell did you just do?" She met his gaze, exhaustion heavy in her eyes. "I listened. I spoke back. Their ship heard me." Rylan stared, realizing her connection to machines went deeper than he had guessed. She was more than cargo, more than a maid. She was a weapon the Syndicate would burn worlds to reclaim. He eased the ship back to cruising speed, his knuckles white on the controls. "They won't stop now. Not until they have you." Lyri reached for his arm, her grip fragile but insistent. "Then you won't let them." He didn't answer. The weight of her words pressed against the silence, heavier than any chain. He had dragged her out of the auction thinking he was saving a life. Now he saw the truth. He had stepped into a war he could not walk away from. The asteroid field stretched out in jagged shadows, glittering fragments drifting like shards of broken glass. Rylan guided the ship through the narrow passages, eyes sharp, every muscle coiled. He had evaded Syndicate pursuit for now, but escape was temporary. He knew predators circled even when unseen. Lyri sat close, her small frame pressed into the co-pilot's chair, hands folded tightly in her lap. The earlier effort had drained her, leaving her pale and silent. She had intervened without hesitation, yet Rylan could not shake the image of her body trembling as she forced herself into contact with the enemy ship. "You can't keep doing that," he said finally. "Whatever you did out there, it nearly tore you apart." Her gaze lifted, steady despite her exhaustion. "I help. If I don't, we die." He gritted his teeth. She was right. Still, the thought of her burning herself out to shield him unsettled him in ways battle never had. She wasn't a soldier. She was something else, fragile and strange, yet unflinching in her loyalty. The console beeped, an incoming message routed through encrypted channels. Rylan hesitated, then accepted. The screen flickered, revealing a scarred face under dim lighting. Cale Dawn leaned back in his chair, a half-empty bottle at his elbow, eyes narrowing when he recognized who was calling. "Rylan Voss," Cale drawled. "You have the worst timing, as always." "Good to see you too," Rylan replied. "I need help. Syndicate's hunting me." Cale snorted. "You always did like to play with fire. What did you steal this time?" "Not what. Who?" Rylan shifted the feed so Cale could glimpse Lyri, her eyes widening at the unfamiliar voice. Kale whistled low. So that's it. The whole sector's buzzing about the fool who robbed a syndicate auction. Didn't think it would be you. I didn't plan it, Rylan said flatly. But she's bonded now. If they take her, it'll kill her. And if I hand her over, it kills me. Kale studied him, silence stretching. At last, he sighed. You always were too stubborn to let go of strays. Fine. Where do you need me? Relief flickered, though Rylan kept his expression neutral. Meet me in the Talon Rift. Bring whatever guns you still have. The call ended, and Lyri leaned closer. He will come. He owes me, Rylan said. And I owe him more than I like to admit. Hours later, the Iron Fang slipped into the shadows of the rift, a region of fractured space where gravity twisted and asteroids drifted like drifting teeth. Kale's ship emerged from the haze, a weathered frigate bristling with jury-rigged cannons. The man himself boarded soon after, carrying the weight of old battles in his stride. The reunion was terse. Kale clasped Rylan's arm, then eyed Lyri with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. She looks harmless. But harmless things don't put half the syndicate on edge. She isn't harmless, Rylan admitted. But she's not their weapon anymore. Kale gave a humorless grin. Then she's ours. For now. Together they planned. The syndicate was moving a flagship into the rift, intent on cornering Rylan. Outrunning such power was impossible. Only a trap could even the odds. They studied the rift's shifting gravity wells, plotting a course that might drag the flagship into danger if timed precisely. Through it all, Lyri remained near, listening without interruption. Finally, she spoke in a voice quieter than the hum of the engines. I can reach them again. Their systems. If I touch the currents, I can confuse them. Rylan's first instinct was refusal, but Kale leaned forward, eyes sharp. If she can scramble their fleet, that gives us the edge. Rylan's jaw tightened. At what cost to her? Lyri's small hand brushed his sleeve. I choose this. You protect me. I protect you. The decision settled like a stone in his chest. He nodded once, and preparation began. When the syndicate fleet arrived, the void lit with the glow of their engines. Sleek cruisers spread wide, herding the freighter and frigate toward the rift's heart. At their center loomed the flagship, a behemoth bristling with firepower, its hull gleaming like a blade. Rylan's voice cut through the comms. Kale, on my mark. Lyri, stay with me. We move as one. The battle erupted in flashes of plasma and streaks of light. Kale's frigate roared forward, guns blazing, tearing into the smaller ships with reckless abandon. Rylan wove the freighter through fire, turning sluggish machinery into a predator's dance. Each shot he took found its mark, his instincts honed by years of survival. But the flagship advanced unshaken, its weapons locking onto them with cold precision. Now, Rylan barked. Lyri pressed her palms to the console. Her eyes fluttered shut, body rigid as if caught in invisible currents. The enemy ships staggered, comms flooded with static, targeting systems faltering. Chaos rippled through the syndicate fleet. Rylan seized the moment, plunging the freighter into the rift's narrowest channel, luring the flagship into pursuit. Gravity surged, rocks spun, and alarms screamed as space twisted violently around them. Kale's voice thundered over comms. You're insane, Rylan. Always have been, Rylan shot back. The flagship pressed closer, too determined to break off. Its bulk strained against the rift's pull, cannons firing wildly as its crew struggled for control. Inside the Iron Fang, Lyri convulsed, her breath ragged as streams of alien code spilled from her lips. The consoles lit with symbols no human could understand, systems bending under her influence. Rylan steadied her with one hand while piloting with the other. Hold on, Lyri. Just a little longer. Her voice cracked but carried resolve. For you. Always. The rift's gravity seized the flagship, dragging it into the heart of the collapsing field. Metal screamed, energy flared, and the massive vessel began to tear apart. The remaining syndicate ships scattered, unwilling to share its fate. Rylan guided the freighter clear, Kale's frigate limping behind with scorched hull but intact. The battlefield fell silent, the void swallowing the last echoes of destruction. In the aftermath, Rylan carried Lyri to the medbay, laying her on the narrow cot. Her skin was clammy, her breaths shallow, yet her eyes opened to meet his. "You're alive," she whispered. "Because of you," he replied. His voice was rough, the words heavier than any oath. Kale entered, shaking his head with a wry smile. "You just made an enemy of the most ruthless cartel in the galaxy. And destroyed their flagship. Congratulations, Rylan. You've officially declared war." Rylan met his gaze, then looked down at the fragile figure still clutching his hand. "It was never just my war. They'll come again. Stronger. And we'll be ready." Lyri's faint smile lingered as her eyes closed in exhaustion, her grip refusing to loosen even in sleep. The ship drifted onward, scarred but unbroken, carrying man, comrade, and bonded alien toward whatever storm lay ahead. The silence after the battle was a fragile thing. Rylan leaned against the medbay wall, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the pale figure resting on the cot. Lyri's chest rose and fell with shallow rhythm, her body strained from the effort of tearing through a fleet's systems. He had seen men burned out by combat, hollowed to shells by the weight of their choices. Yet this small alien had risked herself without hesitation, not for her people or freedom, but for him. Kale stood near the doorway, nursing a fresh scar across his jaw. He had fought in countless battles, but even he looked shaken. "You crippled their flagship," he said. "But you and I both know the Syndicate doesn't bleed without vengeance. They'll regroup. They'll bring more than a fleet next time." Rylan glanced toward him. "Then we don't wait for them to come. We finish this on our terms." Kale raised a brow. "That sounds like the kind of plan that ends with us dead." "Maybe," Rylan admitted. "But if we keep running, she'll never be safe. And neither will we." His gaze drifted back to Lyri, who stirred faintly at the sound of his voice. Her eyes opened, clouded with fatigue but sharp with intent. "You talk of leaving me behind," she whispered. "You cannot. Where you go, I go." Rylan crouched beside her, resting a hand on her shoulder. "I wasn't planning to leave you. But if I fight, you'll be in the fire with me." She smiled faintly, fragile yet unyielding. "Then we burn together." Kale let out a low laugh, though his tone carried no amusement. "You're both mad. But if I'm going to die, might as well be with company worth remembering." Plans formed in grim silence. The Syndicate's strength lay not just in ships but in fear, in the secrecy of their networks. If those networks were exposed, they would fracture under the weight of enemies long waiting for weakness. Lyri carried fragments of that knowledge within her, memories embedded into her very mind. If broadcast across the galaxy, it could undo centuries of Syndicate dominance. The risk was colossal. To transmit the data, they would need to reach a central relay hub deep within Syndicate territory, a fortress bristling with defenses. Attacking it with one battered freighter and a limping frigate bordered on insanity. But Rylan had led soldiers through worse. He understood that sometimes victory was not in strength but in audacity. When they entered the Syndicate sector, alarms erupted almost immediately. Cruisers fanned out, forming a blockade around the relay hub, and at their core loomed a replacement flagship, larger than the last, its hull etched with crimson symbols like scars of war. Kale's voice cut through the comms. "This is suicide, Rylan. And I've never enjoyed suicide." "Follow the plan," Rylan replied. His hands were steady on the controls, his mind sharp. Fear had no place here. Only precision. The battle ignited with blinding ferocity. Kale's frigate surged forward, unleashing torrents of fire that tore into the first wave of Syndicate ships. Rylan wove the Iron Fang through the chaos, every maneuver designed not to destroy but to draw the flagship into the rift's outer currents where its bulk would falter. Inside the cockpit, Lyri braced herself against the console, her voice trembling as she whispered in alien syllables that merged with the ship's hum. Systems bent to her will, shields responding faster, weapons aligning with uncanny accuracy. Each time she flinched, Rylan felt the weight of her sacrifice pressing on him like a physical wound. The Syndicate flagship bore down on them, cannons flaring with merciless intent. One strike ripped across the Iron Fang's hull, sending alarms shrieking. Smoke filled the cabin, but Rylan's grip never faltered. "Lyri," he said, voice iron steady. Now! She cried out, palms pressed flat against the console, eyes blazing with light. Across the sector, syndicate systems flickered and failed. Comms erupted in static, weapon locks vanished, and engines sputtered as if strangled by invisible hands. The flagship shuddered, its power grid collapsing under the weight of her intrusion. Rylan seized the moment, diving through the gap in their formation and pushing the Iron Fang into the relay hub's shadow. He armed the transmission array, the codes Lyri carried spilling into the system like a flood. Across the galaxy, secrets burst into light: slave routes, hidden fortresses, corruption trails. The Syndicate's foundation cracked under the revelation. The flagship roared back to life, lurching toward them with fury. Its engines burned with desperation, determined to erase the insult even if it cost them everything. Kale's frigate intercepted, ramming broadside into the larger vessel with reckless defiance. Explosions cascaded across both hulls as Kale's voice snarled over the comms. "Get it done, Rylan. Don't waste my death." Rylan wanted to argue, but he knew there was no saving him. He throttled forward, transmission complete, the Syndicate collapsing into chaos as their sins became public record. Lyri sagged beside him, eyes dim but alive, her hand clinging weakly to his arm. The flagship's cannons locked on them again, rage untempered. Rylan whispered under his breath, not a prayer but a promise. "Not today." He twisted the freighter through the relay hub's collapsing defenses, riding the shockwave as Kale's frigate detonated in a blaze of light that engulfed the flagship. Silence followed, broken only by the fading hiss of systems straining for survival. The Syndicate's fleet scattered, leaderless and exposed, their power broken not by fleets but by one man, one alien, and the ghost of a friend who refused to die quietly. Hours later, when the fires dimmed and the stars returned to stillness, Rylan stood in the cockpit, Lyri beside him. She leaned against his arm, her voice barely more than a whisper. "You held me when I would have fallen. Now I will never let go." He placed a hand over hers, the weight of loss and victory pressing equally upon him. "You're not clinging to me anymore," he said quietly. "I'm holding on to you." She smiled, fragile yet certain, her bond no longer one of servitude but of choice. The galaxy lay fractured and dangerous, yet for the first time in years, Rylan felt something other than survival. He felt purpose. He set the course for unknown stars, the engines rumbling as the ship carried them into the vastness. Behind them, the Syndicate's empire burned. Ahead, the void stretched infinite, filled with battles yet to come. Rylan glanced at Lyri, her small hand still entwined with his. "Let's see what the galaxy throws at us next." The Iron Fang surged forward, carrying them both into a future written not by fear but by defiance, a story no cartel could silence.